I still remember that Friday night when I held my first real paycheck in my hands. 22 years old, fresh out of college, with an engineering degree I had worked my tail off for. The paper felt heavy with possibility. I thought my father would be proud. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye across our kitchen table and said something that would change everything. 85%. He wanted 85% of my salary. Every single month. For my brother. Before I tell you how my own father tried to bleed me dry for my brother's sake, let me know where you are watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe, because what happened next will show you exactly what happens when family loyalty becomes a one-way street. Growing up in the suburbs of Ohio, I learned early that I was the responsible one. My father, William, worked as a mechanic, coming home with grease under his fingernails and exhaustion in his eyes. My mother, Patricia, picked up nursing shifts when she could. We were not poor, but money was always tight. Then there was Garrett, my younger brother, 5 years behind me. From the moment he could walk, the rules were different for him. I got my first job at 16 bagging groceries at the local supermarket. Garrett never had to work. I paid for my own car insurance, my own gas, my own everything. Garrett got handed the keys to my old Honda when I left for college. Nobody asked him to contribute a dime. When I brought home report cards full of A grades, my father would nod and say that was expected. When Garrett scraped by with C grades and D grades, everyone celebrated like he had won a Nobel Prize. But I told myself it was fine. I was the older brother. I was supposed to be stronger, more capable. I worked 2 jobs through college, took out loans, lived in a cramped apartment with 3 other guys. I graduated with honors in mechanical engineering and landed a job at a tech company in Columbus. The salary was $55,000 a year. For a fresh graduate, that felt like winning the lottery. I wanted to share that joy with my family. I drove the 2 hours back home that Friday, stopped at a nice restaurant, and picked up dinner for everyone. Steaks, the good kind. When I walked through the door, my mother hugged me tight, tears in her eyes. Garrett barely looked up from his phone. My father shook my hand, his grip firm but his face unreadable. We sat down to eat. I told them about the office, about the projects I would be working on, about the health insurance and the retirement plan. My mother kept saying how proud she was. Garrett chewed his steak and scrolled through social media. Then my father set down his fork and knife. The sound of metal on ceramic cut through the conversation like a blade. He said my name once. Just once. Derek. The way he said it made my stomach drop. He told me that now I had a real job. I had real responsibilities. I nodded, thinking he meant I should help out around the house, maybe pitch in for groceries. Then he said the number. 85%. I laughed. I actually laughed because I thought he was joking. His face did not change. He explained it slowly, like I was a child who could not do math. Garrett needed money. Garrett wanted to study graphic design but needed expensive equipment. Garrett needed a car to get around. The family needed to fix the roof, pay off credit card debt, replace the furnace before winter. All of that apparently was my problem now. With 85% of my salary gone, I would be left with about $8,200 a year for myself. Rent alone in Columbus was going to cost me more than that. I looked at my mother. She would not meet my eyes. I looked at Garrett. He was smirking. Actually smirking. Like this was all a joke at my expense. I tried to keep my voice calm. I told my father I could contribute maybe 20%, help out where it made sense. He slammed his palm on the table hard enough to make the plates jump. He asked me if I had no sense of duty to my family. He said they had raised me, fed me, put a roof over my head. Now it was time to pay that back. I sat there stunned. 22 years old, and I was being told that my entire future belonged to a brother who had never worked a day in his life. I asked why Garrett could not get a job. My father's face turned red. He said Garrett needed time to figure things out. Garrett was creative, sensitive. Garrett was not like me. I did not understand what it was like to struggle. That last part almost made me laugh again. I had been struggling my entire childhood while Garrett coasted. I said no, politely at first. I said I would send home 20% and help when emergencies came up, but 85% was impossible. My father stood up from the table. He told me I was selfish. He told me I was ungrateful. He told me that if I walked out that door without agreeing to his terms, I should not bother coming back. I moved to Columbus the next week with everything I owned packed into my beat-up sedan. The apartment I found was small, a one-bedroom, in a building that had seen better decades. But it was mine. I set up my desk, hung up my clothes, and tried not to think about the way my mother had cried when I left. I sent home $900 that first month. 20%, like I had promised myself. My father called 3 days later. He did not ask how I was doing or whether I had settled in. He asked where the rest of the money was. I told him 20% was all I could afford. He hung up without another word. Then the calls started coming more frequently. Once a week, then twice, then almost every other day. Each time there was a new emergency. Garrett needed a laptop. The car broke down. The water heater was leaking. Medical bills. Grocery money. On and on. I helped when I could, sending an extra 100 here, 200 there, but it was never enough. My father's voice grew colder with each conversation. He stopped asking and started demanding. My mother would call after he did, her voice small and sad, telling me how disappointed my father was, how hard things were at home, how Garrett was really struggling. I wanted to ask why a 23-year-old man was struggling to do literally anything, but I bit my tongue. Then I started seeing Garrett's social media posts. New sneakers, the kind that cost $300. Designer jackets. Photos at expensive restaurants. A brand new gaming console with a massive television. He was not struggling. He was living better than I was, and he was doing it on the money I was sending home. I felt something crack inside me. Not anger exactly. Something colder. Clarity. I called my father and told him I was reducing what I sent home to 10%, $450 a month. That was still more than fair given that Garrett contributed nothing. My father did not yell. He just said I would regret this. Then he hung up. For a month nobody called. No texts. No emails. Silence. I told myself it was fine. I focused on work, pulled extra hours, impressed my boss with my dedication. The silence should have been peaceful. Instead, it felt like the air before a storm. 3 months after that last phone call, I drove home for the weekend. I thought maybe enough time had passed. Maybe we could talk like adults. The moment I walked through the door, I knew I had made a mistake. My mother barely hugged me. My father did not even look up from the television. Garrett was sprawled on a brand new couch playing games on a massive screen that definitely had not been there before. That evening, my father called a family meeting. We all sat in the living room. My father stood like he was about to give a speech. He said that starting next month I would send home 85% of my salary. No discussion, no negotiation. That was the family decision. I stayed calm. I asked what would happen if I refused. He said I was not welcome in this house anymore. Simple as that. I looked at each of them, my mother wringing her hands, unable to meet my eyes. Garrett sprawled on that expensive couch I had probably paid for, not even pretending to care. My father standing there like some kind of king delivering judgment. I stood up. I said I would not be sending 85%. I would not be funding a grown man's laziness. I had my own life to build. Garrett sat up then. He called me selfish. He said I thought I was better than everyone else just because I had a college degree and a fancy job. I turned to him and said, "No, I just expected him to take care of himself like an adult." He jumped off the couch and got in my face. My father stepped between us, but he was looking at me, not Garrett. He told me to get out. Right now. If I could not contribute to this family properly, I was not part of this family at all. I looked at my mother one more time. I wanted her to say something. Anything. She just shook her head, tears running down her face, but she did not speak. I walked to my old room, grabbed the few things I had left there, photos mostly, and walked out. Garrett called after me laughing, saying I would come crawling back. My father stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me load my car. I drove back to Columbus that night. The highway stretched out dark and empty ahead of me. I cried for the first 20 miles. Then I stopped. Something settled in my chest. Not peace exactly, but determination. I was done letting them drag me down. If they wanted to cut me loose, fine. I would build something they could never take from me. The first year was the hardest, not because of money, but because of the silence. Every holiday, every birthday, I would think about calling. Then I would remember my father's face, Garrett's smirk, my mother's inability to stand up for me. I kept my head down and worked. My boss, a man named Mr. Harrison, noticed my dedication. He started giving me more responsibility, more complex projects. I thrived. I made a friend at work, a guy named Kyle, from the marketing department. We grabbed lunch one day, and I ended up telling him everything. He listened without judgment. Then he said something that stuck with me. He said family is supposed to build you up, not tear you down.